He was everything I wasn't supposed to want. A man in uniform, sworn to protect the law, to keep order, to draw the line between what's right and what's forbidden. His name was Paulo Hale, and from the moment I met him, that line began to blur. It happened on a late October night, the kind that feels too quiet, too still. I was parked outside a closed diner, hands trembling around a paper cup of coffee gone cold. I shouldn't have been there. The city had rules and I had already broken too many. Then his headlights cut through the rain. A patrol car. A shadow stepped out. Boots hit the pavement, and when he reached my window, everything changed. He leaned down, flashlight glinting against the badge on his chest. "You know why I stopped you?" he asked. But his voice wasn't what I expected. It wasn't sharp or cold. It was calm, low, steady. The kind of voice that could disarm anyone. When our eyes met, I forgot the question. I forgot how to breathe. From that moment, the world around us disappeared. Just the sound of rain, the smell of wet asphalt, and the weight of something dangerous growing between us. He was a man who lived by rules, and I was the one who made him question every single one of them. He said he never crossed lines, that the badge came first, that feelings like these couldn't exist in his world. But the truth? You can't train your heart to obey. Before we begin, make sure you like this video, subscribe to the channel, and turn on notifications because this story will test how far someone can go when love becomes the one rule worth breaking. Would you cross the line for love? The rain hadn't stopped since sunset. It fell in a steady rhythm, washing the streets of downtown Latham City in reflections of amber and gray. I'd been driving aimlessly for hours, trying to make sense of the mess I'd made, of my life, my choices, the silence I had built around myself. My world was small back then. Just me, my car, and the ghosts I carried in the passenger seat. When the flashing lights appeared behind me, I thought it was just another unlucky night. I pulled over by instinct, my heart beating fast, not because I had done anything wrong, but because every cop car reminded me of the walls I couldn't escape. I expected the usual, a routine check, a cold face, a dismissive tone. But when the door opened and I saw him through the blur of rain, something felt different. He approached slowly, his figure outlined by the headlights. The kind of man you notice, even when you try not to. Broad shoulders, tall, steady, moving like the world couldn't shake him. His uniform clung to him under the rain, dark and defined. When he reached my window, I rolled it down halfway, pretending to look calm. "License and registration," he said, voice low, calm, measured, not aggressive, controlled. There was power in how quiet he spoke, the kind of power that doesn't need to raise its voice to be obeyed. I fumbled through the glove compartment, feeling my pulse throb in my ears. When I finally handed the documents to him, our fingers brushed for half a second. It shouldn't have meant anything, but it did. That single touch, cold skin against warm, froze everything. His eyes lifted toward mine, and for the first time that night, I saw something human behind that badge. He looked at the address on my license and raised an eyebrow. "You live out near the old factory district?" I nodded. "Yeah, for now. Not many people stay there these days. Dangerous area." "I like quiet," I said. His mouth twitched, not quite a smile, but close enough to make my stomach turn. "Quiet can get you in trouble." He stepped back, inspecting my car, the dark alleys, the storm still raging above us. Something in his stance told me he wasn't just checking for violations. He was watching me, measuring me, not as a cop, but as a man trying to understand something he couldn't explain. After a moment, he leaned back down. "Everything looks fine. Try to stay out of this area at night. You don't want to end up in a report." I wanted to answer, to say something clever or careless, but my throat wouldn't let me. Instead, I just looked at him, studying the way the rain slid down his jaw, the way his eyes softened for a split second before he turned to leave. He walked back toward his car, and for reasons I still can't explain, I didn't drive away. I watched him instead, the silhouette of a man who looked both unreachable and achingly real at the same time. When he got inside his patrol car, he didn't start it immediately. The lights stayed on, red and white reflections flickering across the wet asphalt between us. Something in me wanted him to come back. And he did. He stepped out again, pulled his hood tighter, and knocked gently on my window. "You said you live near the factory district?" "Yeah, it's a long drive in this weather. I'll follow you, make sure you get there." "That's not necessary," I said. "Maybe not, but I'll do it anyway." I didn't know what to say to that. My chest felt tight. It wasn't protocol, at least not for a guy who didn't look like he needed protection. But I nodded. "Okay." He gave a short nod in return and gestured for me to start the car. I did. His headlights followed me as I drove through the maze of cracked streets and half-abandoned buildings. The storm made everything feel distant, surreal. Every time I glanced in the rearview mirror, his car was there, steady, protective, like a promise I didn't ask for but somehow needed. When I finally parked in front of my small building, the power flickered inside. The neighborhood was silent except for the rain. I stepped out, the cold air cutting through my jacket, and he joined me under the awning, shaking the water off his sleeves. "This is it," I said awkwardly. He looked up at the dark building, then at me. "You live alone?" "Yeah." He nodded slowly, eyes still on me. "You should get inside." "Lock the door." "I will," but I didn't move. Neither did he. The sound of the rain filled the silence between us. He looked like he wanted to say something that didn't fit the badge he wore. Instead, he took a step back, his expression unreadable again. "Good night," he said. "Good night, officer." He turned, walked back to his car, and drove away. But as I stood there, watching the taillights fade into the storm, I realized something strange for the first time in a long time. I didn't feel alone, and that night I had no idea that the man who swore he never crossed lines would soon be the one to destroy every boundary between us. For 3 nights after that encounter, I couldn't stop thinking about him. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw the reflection of his patrol car lights, flashing red against the rain. Every time I passed by the window at night, I half expected to see those same headlights parked outside. It was ridiculous. I didn't even know him. All I had was a name from his badge. Hale. I told myself it was just the adrenaline of being stopped, the tension of that moment replaying in my head. But I knew better. It wasn't fear that kept me awake. It was the calm in his voice, the flicker of curiosity in his eyes. It was the way he said, "I'll follow you," like it wasn't about duty, like it was something else. By the 4th night, I gave up pretending. I found myself walking toward the 12th precinct, where I knew he worked. The streets were slick with melting snow, and my reflection looked like a ghost in the shop windows I passed. I told myself I'd just pass by, maybe catch a glimpse of him. Maybe that would be enough. It wasn't. When I saw him through the glass doors, standing by the reception desk laughing at something another officer said, I froze. Out of uniform, he looked different. Still strong, still intimidating, but softer somehow. His sleeves were rolled up, veins visible down his forearms, hair slightly messy from running his hand through it. For a second, I considered turning back. Then he saw me. He blinked once, his expression shifting from surprise to something I couldn't name. He excused himself from the group and walked toward me. Each step felt like a challenge I didn't know how to meet. "Did something happen?" he asked as soon as he reached me, lowering his voice so only I could hear. I shook my head. "No, I just wanted to say thank you for that night." He frowned slightly. "You didn't have to come all the way here for that." "I know," I said quietly. "But I wanted to." He studied me for a moment, as if trying to decide what my presence meant. Then his expression softened. "How's the neighborhood treating you?" "Still quiet," I replied, smiling faintly. "No reports to write?" "That's good," he said. There was a pause. Too long to be professional, too brief to be personal. Then he gestured toward the side exit. "You want a coffee? There's a diner next door." I could use a break. It wasn't a question. And before my mind could catch up, I nodded. We walked side by side down the wet sidewalk, our steps in sync. Inside the diner, the light was warm and low, the air heavy with the smell of burnt coffee and cinnamon. He ordered 2 black coffees without asking how I took mine. Somehow he already knew. We sat in a booth near the window. For a while we didn't speak. The silence wasn't awkward, it was charged, like the calm before a storm. He tapped his fingers lightly against his cup, his eyes flicking up to meet mine every so often. "So," I said finally, "do you always follow people home after a traffic stop?" He smirked. "Only the ones who look like trouble. And which one am I? The kind that doesn't know it yet." Something in his tone made my pulse race. It wasn't flirtation, not exactly. It was more like confession wrapped in restraint. The air between us felt thick with things unsaid. I leaned forward. "You're not really supposed to be here, are you?" "Probably not," he admitted. "But I'm tired of pretending the badge is the only thing that defines me." That line hit harder than he probably meant it to. I saw something raw in his eyes. Exhaustion, maybe, or loneliness. The kind that doesn't show up in reports or patrol logs. The kind that makes a man sit across from someone he shouldn't be seen with, just to feel something real. When we left the diner, the snow had turned to drizzle again. He walked me back to my car in silence, his hands in his pockets, his shoulders tense. When we stopped by my door, I turned to him. "Thanks for the coffee," I said. He nodded but didn't move away. The space between us felt impossibly small. "Listen," he said quietly, his voice lower than before. "Whatever this is, it can't happen. I wanted to ask why not." But I already knew the answer. The badge, the rules, the eyes of a city that wouldn't understand. Still, I stepped closer. "Then why did you come tonight?" He didn't answer. He just looked at me, his jaw tight, his breath visible in the cold air. I could see the war behind his eyes, duty against desire, discipline against something far more dangerous. "Good night," he said finally, turning to leave. But before he did, he hesitated. His hand brushed mine, just a fleeting touch, and for a moment, the whole world narrowed to that point of contact. He left without another word, but I didn't need one, because I knew then. The line he swore he'd never cross was already behind him. That night, I drove home with my chest burning. Every turn of the wheel felt like I was steering towards something I couldn't stop anymore. And when I looked in the mirror, I could almost swear I saw his car following me again, only this time I didn't want him to stop. It was nearly midnight when I heard the knock. 3 short, sharp taps, not frantic, not hesitant. The kind of knock that carried authority. I knew it was him before I even reached the door. My pulse reacted faster than my thoughts, my body already tense as I unlocked the deadbolt and pulled it open. Paolo stood there, rain clinging to his jacket. The collar of his uniform turned up against the wind. His hair was damp, his eyes darker than I'd ever seen them. Behind him, the street was empty except for his parked patrol car, its headlights slicing through the fog. "Can I come in?" he asked. His voice was low, almost rough, as if he'd been holding it together all night and finally couldn't anymore. I stepped aside, and he walked past me, dripping onto the floor. The smell of rain and steel followed him in, something raw and heavy that filled the silence between us. "What are you doing here?" I asked, closing the door behind him. He didn't answer right away. Instead, he took off his jacket, tossing it over the back of the chair. His shirt clung to his chest, soaked and stretched over every line of muscle. It wasn't just his body that looked worn. It was his face. Something was breaking inside him, and I could see it. "I shouldn't be here," he said finally. "I know, but I couldn't stay away." That confession hit like thunder in a quiet room. I felt it in my chest, in the space between every breath. He ran a hand over his hair, pacing once before stopping in front of me. "You've been in my head since that night," he said. "Every patrol, every report, every time I close my eyes. It's not supposed to happen." "Not like this," I swallowed hard. "You don't have to explain." "Yes, I do." His tone sharpened. "You think this is easy for me? I've spent years keeping everything under control. The badge, the rules, the image. But then you—" He stopped, his voice catching, and then softer. "You made me forget where the line was." The room felt smaller suddenly, the air thick. He looked at me like a man standing at the edge of something he couldn't turn back from. "You came here to say that?" I asked, my voice quieter now. "No," he said. "I came because I didn't want to say it anymore. I wanted to show you. He stepped closer, close enough that I could feel the heat radiating off him despite the cold. His chest rose and fell faster now, and I knew he was fighting it, the part of him that still wanted to run. "I can't stop thinking about you," he admitted, "and I hate that I can't." I wanted to tell him that I felt the same, that the thought of him had haunted me since the moment he leaned down to my car window that first night. But before I could say anything, he reached out, slowly, like he was asking permission without words, and his hand touched the side of my neck. Every nerve in my body caught fire. His fingers were rough, warm, trembling slightly as they lingered on my skin. Our eyes locked. For a heartbeat, everything stopped. The storm outside, the hum of the old refrigerator, the world itself. "Paolo," I whispered, unsure if it was a warning or a plea. He leaned closer, his breath warm against my cheek. "Tell me to stop," he said. But I didn't. I couldn't. He kissed me. It wasn't gentle or careful. It was the kind of kiss that happens when two people have been trying too hard for too long to pretend they don't want this. Months of restraint dissolved in that instant. His hands pulled me closer, one at the back of my neck, the other gripping my waist. I felt his heartbeat pounding against mine, desperate and real. When we finally broke apart, both of us were breathing hard. He stepped back, shaking his head slightly as if waking from a dream. "This is wrong," he muttered. "I shouldn't have. Then why does it feel right?" I interrupted. That question hung in the air like smoke. He stared at me, his expression torn between guilt and relief, between who he was and who he wanted to be. "I don't know," he said, his voice breaking. "But I'm tired of pretending it's not." He took a deep breath and turned toward the door, picking up his jacket. "I have to go before I make it worse." I reached out, grabbing his wrist. "Worse for who?" He froze, his back still to me. "For both of us. Paolo, if you walk out now, it's not going to make this disappear. You'll still think about it tomorrow. And so will I." He turned then, his eyes wet but not from the rain. "You don't understand. Guys like me, we don't get to have this. We wear the uniform, we play by the book, we don't let anyone see who we are. Because once they do, they stop respecting you," I finished softly. He nodded, jaw tightening. "Exactly." We stood there for a long moment, the rain hammering against the window. Then quietly I said, "I respect you, Paolo, but not because of your badge. Because of your heart, the part you're trying so hard to hide." He looked at me for a long time. His expression softened, the corners of his mouth twitching just enough to show a glimpse of the man behind the armor. Then, with a sigh that sounded like surrender, he stepped forward and pressed his forehead against mine. "If anyone finds out," he murmured. "They won't," I said. "But they always do." When he finally left, the air felt colder. I watched his patrol car disappear into the fog, the red and blue lights fading until they were gone. That night, I realized something. Love isn't always born in the right place or at the right time. Sometimes it starts in the rain, between two people who were never meant to meet, and once it starts, you can't stop it. Not even if you want to. The next few days felt like walking a tightrope stretched over fire. Every morning I told myself it was over, that what happened that night was a mistake, a moment of weakness. But every time my phone buzzed, every time I saw a patrol car pass by, I felt that same pull in my chest, that strange gravity that had his name written all over it. 3 days later, I saw him again. It wasn't planned. I was walking home from the grocery store, my hood up against the drizzle, when I heard a familiar voice. "Hey!" I turned and saw Paolo leaning against his patrol car parked along the curb. He wasn't in uniform this time, just jeans, a grey shirt and a black jacket. But even without the badge, he carried himself like someone who could command a room without saying a word. "Are you following me now?" I teased, trying to hide the way my heart skipped. He smiled faintly. "Maybe, or maybe I was hoping I'd run into you." The street was quiet, just the hum of distant traffic and the sound of rain against the pavement. We stood there for a moment, both of us waiting for the other to break the silence. Finally I said, "You left that night like you were running from something." He nodded slowly. I was. From me. His eyes met mine, dark, steady, and tired. From what I feel when I'm around you, I didn't know what to say. So I just stood there, letting the words settle between us. He took a small step closer. I tried to ignore it, he said. Tried to tell myself it didn't mean anything. But every time I think about you, it's like something in me wakes up that I've spent years trying to bury. The rain started falling harder, turning the sidewalk into glass. He didn't move, and neither did I. Paolo, I said softly, you can't keep living like this, pretending you're someone else. He let out a rough laugh. You think I don't know that? You think I haven't spent years trying to make it all fit? The badge, the brotherhood, the image they expect? He shook his head. They don't want a man who feels. They want a machine in a uniform. He looked away, his jaw tightening. If anyone at the precinct finds out about us, I lose everything. My job, my reputation, the little respect I've earned. And what about what you'll lose if you keep hiding? I asked. Yourself? He flinched, just slightly, and I knew I'd hit the truth he didn't want to face. Without thinking, I reached out and touched his arm. The muscle tensed under my fingers, but he didn't pull away. He looked down at my hand, then back at me, like he was memorizing what it felt like to be seen. Come with me, he said suddenly. Before I could ask where, he grabbed my hand and led me down the street toward his car. We drove in silence for several minutes, the city lights fading into the distance. The rain drummed against the windshield, the world outside blurring into streaks of grey and orange. Finally, he turned off the main road and pulled into an empty parking lot overlooking the river. The city stretched beyond it, quiet, washed in fog. He shut off the engine but didn't move. This is where I go when I can't breathe, he said quietly. I looked at him, really looked at him. The man who always seemed unshakable now sitting there, raw and exposed. You ever wish you could just start over? He asked. Forget everything they told you to be? All the time, I said. But you can't erase who you are. You can only decide who you're going to be next. He turned to me, eyes burning. And who am I supposed to be, huh? A cop who crosses lines, who falls for someone he shouldn't. You think that story ends well? No, I said honestly. But maybe it's the only one that's real. That broke something in him. He exhaled long and heavy, then leaned back in his seat. For a moment he didn't speak. Then he whispered, Every time I look at you, I feel like I'm standing on the edge of something I can't control. Maybe that's the point, I said. Maybe love isn't supposed to be controlled. He turned his head, meeting my gaze again. This time there was no hesitation. He reached across the console and pulled me closer. His hand gripped the back of my neck, firm but trembling, and then his lips were on mine. Harder this time, more desperate. The sound of rain faded. The world outside the car ceased to exist. It was just us, the hum of our breathing, the heat of his hand against my jaw, the quiet confession in every touch. When he pulled away, his forehead rested against mine. His voice was barely a whisper. If anyone ever finds out... I don't care, I said. Do you? He didn't answer, but he didn't move away either. We sat there for a long time, the city stretching out beneath us. He traced his thumb along my cheek like he was afraid I might disappear. Then his radio crackled to life. A woman's voice came through, sharp, urgent. Unit 47, we have a 1054 on East Avenue. Possible armed suspect in the vicinity. He froze. The moment shattered like glass. He straightened, grabbed the radio and replied, Unit 47, copy that. On my way, he looked at me, regret in his eyes. I have to go. I know. He hesitated, like he wanted to say more but didn't know how. Then he whispered, Stay safe, please. He started the car, and within seconds, the headlights cut through the mist. The patrol siren wailed once, before fading into the night. I sat there long after he was gone, the echo of his touch still lingering on my skin. That was the night I realized love doesn't wait for perfect moments. It happens between chaos and duty, between what you can't say and what you can't hide. And sometimes it takes a man with a badge to teach you that even the strongest fall, especially when the heart decides to defy the law.
The call that night changed everything. For 3 days, I didn't hear from Paolo. Not a message, Not a glance through the windshield of a passing patrol car. Just silence. It was the kind of silence that eats at you, the kind that fills your chest with questions you're too afraid to answer. I told myself he was busy, that police work was unpredictable. But deep down, I knew something was wrong. The way he'd looked at me before driving off that night, that flicker of fear behind his eyes, it wasn't just about the suspect he was chasing. It was about us. On the fourth day, I saw the news. There had been a standoff near the East District. A suspect barricaded in an abandoned building. One officer injured. The report didn't mention names, but I didn't need it to. My stomach turned cold. I drove there before I could think. The streets were still taped off, blue lights flashing across empty windows. The air smelled of gunpowder and wet asphalt. I parked and ran to the perimeter, heart hammering. An officer stopped me. "Sir, you can't be here." "I'm looking for someone, Officer Paulo Hale. Please, I just need to know if he's okay." The officer's expression softened slightly. He hesitated, then said, "He's at St. Andrews. Took a bullet to the shoulder. He's lucky to be alive." For a moment, my knees almost gave out. Relief and fear collided in my chest like two storms meeting head-on. I thanked him and drove straight to the hospital. The waiting room felt like a battlefield of its own. Fluorescent lights, the smell of antiseptic, and the dull hum of machines somewhere down the hall. I asked for his room number, and when the nurse looked at me with suspicion, I said the only thing that came to mind. "I'm family." When I walked into his room, he was sitting up, his arm in a sling, his skin pale against the white sheets. He looked exhausted but alive. When he saw me, his lips parted slightly, surprise first, then something else. Something unspoken. "What are you doing here?" he asked quietly. I stepped closer. "You think I'd just stay home after seeing that?" He exhaled, running a hand through his hair. "You shouldn't have come." "I didn't come to cause trouble. I came because I was scared out of my mind." His eyes softened, the lines in his forehead fading just a little. "You could have been seen. People talk and—" "Let them," I cut in. "I don't care who sees me." He looked away, jaw tight. "But I do." The silence between us felt heavier than any words could fill. I moved closer until I was right beside his bed. "You almost died, Paulo. Doesn't that tell you something? Life's too short to keep pretending." He turned his head toward me, his voice low. "You think I don't know that? You think I wasn't thinking about you when it happened? About all the things I never said?" "Then say them now," I whispered. He hesitated, his eyes locked on mine. Then finally he said, "I love you." It came out like a confession, raw and broken, but real. My breath caught. I'd imagined hearing those words 100 times, but nothing prepared me for the way they actually sounded, like a wound and a cure all at once. I reached out, my hand trembling slightly, and touched his face. "I love you too." He closed his eyes, leaning into my touch just for a moment. And then he pulled back. "You know what this means, right? If anyone finds out." "I know," I said softly. "But maybe it's time they did." He laughed under his breath, a sound halfway between pain and disbelief. "You have no idea what that would cost me." I met his gaze. "Maybe I do. But I also know what it costs to keep hiding." He didn't answer. He didn't need to. The look in his eyes said everything. That night, I stayed with him. We didn't talk much, just sat in the quiet, our hands brushing occasionally, both of us too afraid to move but too unwilling to let go. Outside, the rain came again, tapping against the window like a heartbeat that wouldn't stop. The next morning, when I returned with coffee, his room was empty. The bed was made, his name tag gone from the door. Panic flooded through me. I rushed to the front desk. "Where's Officer Hale?" I asked. The nurse gave me a tight, apologetic smile. "He checked out early. Said he had things to take care of." Things to take care of? For days after that, I didn't see him. Calls went unanswered. His apartment was locked, and his car was gone from the usual spot. It was as if he'd vanished. 2 weeks later, I received a letter. No return address, just my name on the front in his handwriting. My hands shook as I tore it open. I thought leaving would make it easier, but it doesn't. Every street, every siren, Every reflection, it's you. You're the only thing that ever made me feel like more than the badge. But I can't stay. They're already asking questions, and if they find out, it won't just be my career on the line. It'll be yours too. Don't wait for me. Just remember that I didn't run from you. I ran for you. I read it a dozen times before I realized I was crying. That night, I drove to the river, the same spot where he once told me he went when he couldn't breathe. The city lights shimmered on the water, and for a moment, I swore I could hear his voice in the wind. Some loves aren't meant to last forever. Some are meant to remind you that you're still alive, that somewhere, in the chaos, you found something real. I folded the letter and tucked it inside my jacket. I'll wait anyway, I whispered to the empty night. Just in case. And in that silence, the only sound was the river, carrying his memory away, but never far enough to forget.